Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Terrebonne Home Care, and we thank you for joining us, however you may be joining us. You know, it's this time of year when we see lots of changes. Some of those may be termites, as we look forward to getting some information from one of the gentlemen from the LSU Ag Center, Aaron Ashbrook. Aaron, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Of course, Aaron is an LSU entomologist and associate professor over at LSU. So thanks for joining us and talking a little bit about it today. Let's talk just a little bit about where these termites come from and maybe what kind they are.
Yes, that's a great question. So these are the Formosan subterranean termite. They are, of course, subterranean termites. They originated from Asia, in particularly Taiwan. And this actually, of course, goes towards their name Formosan, which was Formosa, the previous name of Taiwan.
Okay.
So they were established in Hawaii in the 1800s, and then they were accidentally introduced to continental U.S. through ships that were moved from the Pacific during World War II and then brought back. And so the lifeboats that were on those warships made of wood had the termites inside.
Okay. Accidentally ended up here.
Yes, exactly.
I got you. So I think we're starting to see some of the swarming of the Formosan termites. When does that start, and how long does it normally last?
Yes, so we're right in the beginning of the swarming period for the Formosan subterranean termite. It usually starts mid to late April, and then it will continue on through early June. However, it peaks around mid-May. Now, if it is a smaller termite colony, they may swarm for about 15 minutes. However, if it's a larger colony, they could produce swarmers for about an hour.
Wow.
And again, if it's a larger colony, they can swarm multiple times during that swarming season.
Yeah, and so we can see that at different times. Is there certain humidity or certain temperature, anything that really impacts or affects that?
Yeah, so they do prefer to swarm after rains or when it is more humid, and that helps them survive. The alates are actually pretty vulnerable to desiccation, and so if they don't establish a new nesting site somewhere soon, they do die relatively quickly.
Okay. Now, you talked about how they die off. Does it cause any harm? Does this swarming cause any harm or damage?
Yes, it's a great question and also a common concern with these termites. So the swarming process itself is not a damage causing phase for the termites. They are primarily focusing on finding new mates and then subsequently establishing new colonies. So again, they're not really causing harm in this period. However, it could indicate that there are termites either nearby your neighborhood or potentially in the house if you're finding them emerging from a place in the structure.
Yeah. So flying in the house very often means that they may have come in from outside. And so that's one of those things that I think people think about. You know, let's talk about where we find them. If we find them inside versus finding them outside and or where.
Yes, that's a very important distinction that we want to make is because you're likely going to have Formosan subterranean termites flying and entering your home. And if they are doing that from the exterior, you should be aware of them, but of course not panic. And what we'd recommend is that you vacuum them up or wipe them up with a napkin. Of course, you can seal any cracks or exteriors to the home. And of course, they like to enter these areas that are well lit and they are nocturnal. This is primarily when they are swarming at night, in particular reference to the Formosan subterranean termites. Now, those lights are what's going to attract them to structures and maybe result in them entering the indoor environment. Now, if they do enter the home, they also have to have the proper conditions to establish, which is basically the wood has to have high enough moisture content for them to establish and start feeding in that area.
And sometimes once they're inside, do they really kind of search out water? Can you often find when they're not flying, maybe find them in your tubs or in your sinks, searching out water?
Yes, so that is a place that they will be looking for. We often hear that there are termites around the drains, and of course, underneath the bathtub, underneath the shower, sink entry points as well. So they do use those pipe areas, pipe connective points, to not only move around structures, but also to access water from the exterior of those pipes, of course.
Yeah, and I think you may have answered this question already, but what are some of the ways that we can prevent termites from coming in? Is that what you meant by the lights and the sealing of cracks and those kinds of things?
Yeah, so those are two different strategies, of course, to help reduce them from coming in. Some of our first strategies and recommendations are, of course, to work with your local pest control company, have them conduct preventative termite work. This could be either the installation of termite bait stations, the application of termiticide as a barrier treatment, or the pre-treating of wood. And this is particularly more in reference to pre-construction with the pre-treated wood. Now, similarly, if you are having a home built, you could consider having termite resistant materials either placed during construction or while you're doing potential renovations or additions to your home.
Yeah,
So outside
I'm
of
sorry.
that, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, please. Outside of that.
You could inspect your home. You can look for mud tubes. So this is something unique to the subterranean termite family. These termites, they're going to be creating mud tubes to help reduce their desiccation and drying out to the environment, and it also allows them to move around somewhat more undetected. And of course, just be aware of potential moisture sites in your home that could be target areas that termites might want to establish at.
Aaron, we appreciate your information so very much. We thank you for that. We know that the public has gotten a lot from this, so we appreciate it. We're going to take those under advisement, and good luck to you all over in Baton Rouge.
Yep. Thank you very much, and be happy to help out with any termite issues. Reach out to the LSU Ag Center.
We sure will. All right. And thank you very much for joining us. That'll do it for this particular segment. Don't go anywhere. A lot more Bayou time right here.